Hi, this is Jurgen Rasmussen. Welcome to the Provocative Hypnosis Blog. This episode is titled The Myth of Self Esteem. So very often, clients come into my office and claim that they have low self esteem. And very often, they attribute whatever issues they come in with, whether it's an addiction or relationship issues or anxiety or depression or anger, they may say something to the effect of, really deep down, I think this all boils down to my low self-esteem. Or, at my core, I feel deficient, or I feel unlovable, or I feel like a weak person, or someone who's just not worthwhile or not enough. And quite naturally, then, they think that the solution to this is to raise their self esteem so that they can have high self esteem. And they want me to, give them tools, exercises that can improve their self esteem. Now, there's only one problem. There is no such thing as self esteem. It's a myth. It doesn't exist. It's not even an illusion, really. It's a myth. It's non-existent. So the first thing I want to communicate to you is that people don't experience low self-esteem. No one experiences low self-esteem. People experience thought esteem, not self-esteem. So people may have low thought esteem. So what do I mean by this? Well, I quite simply mean that people never experience a deficient self. They experience a collection of thoughts and some feelings, which very easily can look like a self. We haven't trained ourselves to pay attention. Let me offer some stories and some perspectives to kind of nudge you in this direction. So, one thing I've noticed, for example, is when I see clients can tell me the most horrific tales of abuse and abandonment and trauma. And, they can tell stories about uh, how, they're deficient or they're not enough or they're not worth loving, and I'm always kind of immune to that, meaning they might be sitting in my office or on Skype suffering immensely, but I never do. Now here's the relevancy. The relevancy is I have to have all those same thoughts to be able to understand or attempt to understand their experience. So they might say, you know what, if I get nervous during my presentation and people see me trembling on stage, that's just so embarrassing, and and I might ask them, for that to be a problem, what does that seem to suggest about you? And they go, well, that means that I'm weak. It kind of confirms that I'm this weak person, right? So I have to kind of imagine that to attempt to understand their experience. Or they might say, if my wife has an affair or if my husband leaves me for someone else, that would be terrifying because that means that I wasn't enough, I wasn't sufficient, and that really plays on my low self-esteem. Well, the question is, why don't I ever suffer when they suffer with these thoughts? And the only reason is I don't claim them as mine. I claim them as the client's. It's the client's thoughts, right? So if you listen to a good friend and a good friend tells you the same types of stories, notice that you're also kind of immune. Sure, you may feel sympathy for your friend. You may feel some empathy. You may feel compassion for that person, but you're kind of immunized. You don't feel that level of pain, even though you have the exact same thoughts in an attempt to understand their experience. Why are you immunized in this context? Despite having the same thoughts, you're not claiming them as your own. You're labeling them as, this is my friend Samantha or my friend Steve's thoughts, you know, and as a result, you don't really suffer. Now, the only difference is when these thoughts emerge spontaneously in you and there's no one else around, you don't attribute them to someone else. There's a selfing process that comes in and claims them and says, these are my thoughts. And as soon as that afterthought comes in and says, these are my thoughts, well, now they can very easily feel like you. So instead of the recognition that the I'm not enough thought is here, I'm experiencing a thought that says I'm not enough, it suddenly seems as if I am not enough. That's the crucial distinction. So as soon as the selfing process claims the thought as mine, now it seems as if these thoughts say something deeply personal about me. There's a me here that somehow needs to be improved or fixed or solved. Now we're off to the races with a lot of thinking around this. So this habit of self-esteem, for most people, it's essentially that if they succeed, you know, at work or in sports or in their career or financially or whatever benchmark that the culture that they're in has set, or whatever they've kind of decided is important, if they succeed at that, there's an afterthought that says, not only did you succeed at that, but you're successful. You're a successful person. It's the self that kind of gets added to the performance. So now I have good self-esteem. Of course, if I no longer succeed as much, there's often a thought that comes in and rates me globally as not successful, thereby not worthwhile or good, or because I do these good acts, that means that I'm a good person. Well, conversely, if I do bad acts, that also means that I'm a bad person, right? Or if my partner loves me or wants to have sex with me or I get social approval, then that means that I am worthwhile or good or successful or lovable, right? But this is really just a habit. It's really just a collection of thoughts. So, what can we do? Well, there's quite a few things that we can do. Um, One is to quite simply stop when thoughts appear and to ask a question such as, is this really my thought? Do these thoughts and feelings really belong to me? Like, am I the source of these thoughts and feelings? And if you do, and if you really honestly explore it, you'll begin to realize that, oh shit, these thoughts have been around way before I was even born. They've been around in literature, for hundreds of years. They may have been around for tens and thousands of years, as long as we have had symbolic language. So, all the typical stories, self deficiency stories about not being enough, being broken, being damaged, being not worthwhile, you know, having to be perfect, having to be in control, needing approval, these thoughts are all way older than you as an organism. I'm not talking about consciousness itself, which is timeless, right? But I'm talking about as an organism. These thoughts are way older than you. Now, if these thoughts and emotions were around way earlier than you as an organism even came on the scene, how could they belong to you? How could you be the source of them or the thinker of them? So there's very often a huge advantage in learning to just describe these thoughts and feelings in the passive sense, as in fear is here, or I must succeed is visiting. The thought I must succeed is visiting, or, you know, it would be horrible if I got rejected, just turn the corner. Or I need to be in control, just appeared and disappeared, right? Instead of adding, I'm anxious, or I need to be in control, or I need to be perfect, you kind of dismantle this tendency to seemingly make a self. You suddenly begin to see that, wait a minute, all these thoughts that I took to be me are really a very impersonal part of human nature. Now, the the other thing that can make thoughts very painful is this idea too that not only do they say something unique about me, but I'm the originator. I'm the thinker of the thought, right? Explore that. Look for the thinker. Meaning, notice that thoughts appear. Right? There's one thought, and then there's a next thought, and there's a body sensation, perhaps. Right? This you can all verify and experience, but experientially, look for the thinker behind the thought. If you do, you'll never find it because there is no thinker behind the thought. What we call the thinker behind the thought is just another thought in the thought stream. It's an illusion of sorts, It's a bit like a good analogy is, let's say at night, let's call just the open space of awareness for mind, let's call it your mind, just as a, so the open space of awareness at night kind of loses itself in a dream. To have a dream experience, it has to kind of lose itself in the dream and seemingly become a subject, a seemingly separate character in the dream from whose perspective an outside world of people and objects experience. So now it seems as if you are this character in the dream that everything kind of revolves around. And this looks really real. But every time you wake up from the dream, uh, there's a potential realization that, you know what? There never was a separate character in the dream that everything seemed to revolve around. That was just another image or part of the dream. It wasn't really separate from the dream, so to speak. Another thing here is another thing that you can do is to practice remaining, practice resting as that which remains every time a thought or a feeling dissolves. So if you just rest as consciousness, meaning as the knowing element of experience, you can kind of notice that a car just drove by, but when that sound disappears, you, meaning beingness, life, experience itself, doesn't disappear. That's how you know that the sound of the car is not essential to your being, because when the sound of the car disappears, you, beingness, the open space of awareness, still remain. A person might walk by and notice that when that perception disappears, you don't disappear, right? So nothing you see and hear is essential to your nature or to your beingness. Notice the same thing with thoughts. The I'm not enough thought may appear. The anxious feeling in the body may appear, but it always disappears, meaning the thought always dissolves, the feeling always dissolves. Rest as that which remains every time the thought disappears. Because if the thought disappears and your beingness, so to speak, remains, that has to mean that you're not those thoughts. You're not those feelings. They're not essential to your nature. Also notice that the fact that you can see something, you can see the thought, or you can hear the thought, or you can feel it in the body, meaning you can take it as object, also means that you're not fused with it. The fact that you can see it means that you're not it. The hints don't get that much clearer than that. So notice that you can see your thoughts, you can hear your thoughts, you can feel the sensations. That which knows the thought is not identical to the thought because that which knows the thought remains every time the thought moves. So practicing that is extremely useful. Also notice that, you know, thoughts and perceptions and sensations just appear, and then as a filler thought between sensations and perceptions, these self-referential I thoughts appear and say, I saw that, I heard that, I made that decision, I did that. But that thought was not in fact present during the previous perception or the previous sensation. Afterthought. It's just another thought in the stream. And what happens is that afterthought 18 comes up and says, I did that, I saw that, I did that performance. And it claims credit for the previous activity. It kind of makes an invisible thread between itself and all these other I thoughts, creating the illusion of this stable entity that was there before everything happened. So the end result of the process now looks like the initiator of the process. This is a psychological trick. Notice that. Notice that at the moment of seeing, the I thought is not there. The moment of hearing, the I thought is not there. The afterthought that claims to be the thinker was not there during the previous thought. There's a lot of liberation to be found in exploring this, not in a theoretical way, but in a very empirical, direct experience sort of way. Something else you can do too, you know, is whenever these self-referential thoughts and feelings appear, ask the question, well, where am I? You know, this deficient self that all these thoughts seem to refer to, they seem to imply this stable entity that I am. Well, where am I? Now, the thought process might go, well, I'm here. I'm in my body. But notice that these are afterthoughts. Those sensations were not there during the thoughts that the sensations take credit for. Don't ask these questions theoretically, ask them experientially, like, well, where am I? This I that these thoughts appear. And see if there's any self really to be found. The more you engage in that, the more that trick of the mind will reveal itself to be exactly what it appears to be. So this I that needs to be perfect, or this I that needs to be in control, or this I that has to never be weak, or must not get rejected, or can't handle criticism, where is it? In experience, experientially look for it. The silence that appears actually is the answer. The character is nowhere to be found. So, whenever people try to work on their self esteem, what they're really doing is that they're trying to work on a set of thoughts that they've identified as themselves. But you're not who you think you are. The story of Joan or James or Christina or Monica or whatever is not who you are. It's a set of stories. Same goes with other people. Other people are not who you think they are. The story you have in your mind about your father is not your father. It's a collection of thoughts. So if you and I meet, you know, you will appear to be whatever my mind kind of makes you out to be, but you're not that story. If I so called reject you or approve of you, I'm rejecting or approving a story of who you appear to be. But you're not that. You are not made up of what other people think you are, or what you think other people think you are. These are also stories. So consider this. If I'm colorblind and that really bothers you, it's because you're adding a story that my colorblindedness somehow revolves around you. It threatens your self-concept of being a good teacher or a good communicator, for example. And now you need to improve your self-esteem. But if I'm colorblind, I'm not colorblind towards you, I'm just colorblind. If I lack empathy, compassion, or perspective taking skills, or reasoning skills, or basic intelligence, or decency, or whatever it might be, that's a bit like colorblind. I'm essentially saying, look, this is who I think you are. This is how the world appears to me. If you're having self-esteem issues around it, it's because there's a story in you that claims that story to be you. But in the same way that I'm not colorblind towards you, I'm not psychologically blind towards you. So helping clients and people to see that what they thought was self-esteem really is thought esteem. They're not experiencing a self, they're experiencing a constellations of thoughts and feelings, and that they always remain whenever those thoughts and feelings dissolve is a huge game changer. Now, there's some artistry in terms of how you do that. There's some insights to be had. There's some very specific skills to be practiced. And if this resonates with you, if you would like to make some changes in you around this, if you think you have self-esteem issues and you want some guidance in terms of seeing through this illusion in the way that feels real, you can reach me at provocativehypnosis.com. Or if you're a therapist and you'd like to see this more clearly for yourself, and you'd like a way of working with this with actual clients, seek me out for some mentoring at provocativehypnosis.com. Anyways, I hope this was useful. Till next time.